In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast, Leif Thulin is on to share his thoughts on Kentucky basketball. They have a big game tomorrow as Coach Kel'el returns to Lexington, but we are here to talk about Kentucky's new blueprint. We want to talk about the NBA prospects on Kentucky. Will they have a player drafted in 2025? Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, along with my co-host, the man that watches more college basketball than anyone I know, Leif Thulin. We are here to talk about Kentucky basketball because it is a different Kentucky basketball than we have been accustomed to over the last, 15 plus years. But there is a big game coming up on Saturday. But before we get into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And if you are not subscribed to the Locked On NBA Big Boy YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode, because I'm a little biased, but I believe we are your daily source and the best source for NBA draft content. All right, let's get right into it. Big game tomorrow. Not necessarily records-wise, but then again, every game in the SEC is a big game because the conference is just absolutely brutal this year. We've talked about that at length on this podcast. But tomorrow's a little different. You have Kentucky coming in at number 12, they're ranked at number 12. They're 15-5 against a struggling Arkansas team at 12-8. But Arkansas is coached by none other than Kentucky coaching legend, Coach John Calipari. Arkansas struggling. Arkansas had the number one transfer portal class. Arkansas had quite a few prospects that committed to Kentucky, backed out of their commitment to Kentucky to follow Cal to Arkansas. And I don't know, this could be the new rivalry. I don't know what the reception is going to be tomorrow, but I'm intrigued by it. So I want to hear your thoughts on what are you expecting from the crowd in Lexington. I mean, are they going to boo? Are they going to be happy? I just want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think in their truest hearts of hearts, the Wildcats fans are thrilled to be rid of John Calipari. And so I think they're going to be relieved that they have the better coach. And it's going to be seen because Calipari and Arkansas have not played that hard of a schedule and are doing very poorly, as opposed to Kentucky, who's played a difficult schedule. They're 4-3 in SEC play, but significantly better, 15-5, as opposed to Arkansas, 1-6 in the SEC, 12-8. I think the reception will be negative because the end of the Calipari tenure was not great. The way in which it could be positive is if they have a tribute video and it talks about the early days with Anthony Davis winning a title, even before then with John Wall, Boogie Cousins, Brandon Knight, and then they go to the Anthony Davis year and they win it all. They go to the Karl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein, Harrison Twins era where they won 38 straight games. Then you might get people cheering. So I think it may not be as loud of a, oh, we hate this guy, as it would be if it were kind of the exit that Chris Beard had from Texas Tech. And you get people leaving Texas Tech. He goes to Texas and they hate him. Ed Cooley leaves Providence for Georgetown. They hate him. This time, I think Calipari was wanted to leave by the fans, so I don't think it's going to be as raucous of a, oh, we can't stand you. I think it's going to be half people appreciating what was in the early 2010s, and then half of them thankful for him to be gone.
I'm torn. There's one part of me that feels like Kentucky has such a diehard fan base that loves basketball that they may, just boo him like crazy just because they may feel like the program hasn't lived up to the standards that they expected. But then on the other hand, and I haven't thought about it like you. It sounds like you have really thought this out, because I didn't even think about the tribute video. But then I can see your point on that case. If you have a tribute video, or if you have like Karl Anthony Towns, there's a quick 5-second clip of him saying something, "Thank you, Coach Cal," kind of really make it like emotional in a sense, then maybe the Bulls will back off. But then I don't know if you want to do that, because I don't know if that actually helps Kentucky in a sense. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. And Arkansas needs a win. Like you said, they're 1-6 in conference play. I know Cal would absolutely love to get a win. But if they get blown out, which I think there's a legitimate chance that could happen. If they get blown out, you're talking about like a modern offense versus an offense that really struggles to score, then I just wonder what the reception is going to be from the Arkansas fan base. But anyway, let's just talk about the difference in rosters. And we talked about this in the first time we did this. We did this episode, I want to say back in like September or August, and we titled it Kentucky's New Blueprint. We called it Is the One and Done Era. And the question that I had coming into the season was, who is Kentucky's best NBA prospect, and will they have anybody selected in 2025? To be honest, today, I don't know. I have no idea. They have a good team. It's a totally different team than what we're used to. They have quite a few players that I think are going to get two ways or play in the NBA at some point, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So I think they'll have two players play in the NBA that are going to be there probably next year. I think there's an argument you could make for younger players that haven't gotten a chance to play. The question is, will they get drafted is a little trickier, because the two guys that stand out to me as the most likely to make the NBA are Otega Oweh and Koby Brea, who make it in entirely different fashions. Koby Brea, for instance, is the best shooter in college basketball. And I believe in today's era of the NBA, if you can shoot, there's a place for you. You can surround him with good defenders and make up for his ineptitude on the defensive end because of his stellar shooting. He's also 6'7", which makes him a little more valuable of a commodity than some other stellar shooters that have come out of college basketball. Think of the ilks of like Fletcher McGee, someone like that, who just came off pin downs and knocked down a million threes, but it was too small. So I think he'll make the NBA. I don't think he's drafted. And the other part about this is the part you brought up, the drastic difference between Calipari, where they were one and done. You're drafting 18 and 19-year-olds and you're projecting. These guys are closer to their finished products, but they're older. And then the other one, Otega Oweh, you made the point that you had spoken with people, and they see a way he can be likened to Lou Dort in terms of just a defensive, rugged guy. Well, I think that has to be the role, because he's shooting 31% from three. He is the leading scorer. He is kind of a big shot taker for them. Sometimes big shot maker, but a lot of times big shot taker. When they need a bucket, he often finds the ball in his hands, and that actually shocks me a little bit. I would argue their best player in collegiate basketball is Lamont Butler, because he's their leader. He's a great defender. But let me pose you this question. So if Otega Oweh is supposed to be Lou Dort, why, when he's on the backcourt with the guy who's won 2 Mountain West Defensive Player of the Years in Lamont Butler, why are they terrible defensively? And I'm not saying it's just them as the issue, but it makes me a little skeptical of the defensive want to of Otega Oweh, because I think he's a great competitor. I think he could be that, but it does scare me that he's putting so much effort into offense and being, somewhat efficient, but not a great shooter. And then their defense as a team is not very good. But I think he's got the athletic prerequisites to make the NBA.
Well, that's why, to me, he's drawn comparisons to Lou Dort. You remember Lou Dort, when he was a freshman at Arizona State, he only wanted to get buckets. He was very inefficient, and that, to me, played a role in why he wasn't drafted. But shout out to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They saw something in him. And of course, he had to change his mindset. And now he's a player that, he's probably going to sign a contract that's going to put him over $150, $200 million in career earnings, because I think he just signed 80 recently, and he is a key call to a team that has title aspirations. So I think for teams that are looking for the next Lou Dort, Oweh is the guy that kind of fits the description in a sense. But of course, it's going to have to change his mentality, because offensively, yes, he's talented, he's athletic, but in my opinion, at least from teams that I've spoken with, they're more intrigued by what he can bring on the defensive end. And so they're hoping for a Lou Dort type mentality transformation. All right, up next, I want to talk about their best prospect because, in my opinion, I think it's Jaxson Robinson. So we're going to talk about Jaxson Robinson and the roller coaster ride that is Jaxson Robinson. Stay tuned. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back, guaranteed, no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, second segment. Leif mentioned that Otega Oweh and Koby Brea, he believes, are their two best NBA prospects. I would say it's Jaxson Robinson. He's been on my radar for a couple of years, but it has always been a roller coaster ride. He has the physical tools. You see the talent, the shooting, even though the numbers are good, you just feel like he should be in the 40s from three. He had a stretch earlier this month where I'm like, all right, he turned it around. I know this is like year 5. I know this is school, number 4? But he's always teased me with his talent. So he had this stretch where he was 9 of 12 from the floor against Mississippi State. He had 27 points. He follows that up 3 days later, 8 of 17 from the floor against Texas A&M, scores 22 points. Over those 2 games, he was 12 of 23 from deep. I'm like, Jaxson Robinson has finally arrived. Since then, he hasn't been bad. I mean, he scored in double figures since then, but he hasn't come close to duplicating those numbers. He's shot the ball well, but I think Jaxson Robinson is a player that, in a very limited and reduced role in the NBA, is going to find a way to stick. Yes, he's shooting 36% from 3. I'm not sure why. I think it should be higher because he's pretty much been hovering around 34, 35 for the last 3 years. But for some reason, like I said, I don't know why, I think he's going to find a way to stick in the NBA. But the one thing that I've heard consistently is he's got the talent, but is he tough enough? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw him a lot because he was at BYU. So I saw plenty of his games. And I always was left desiring more. And that's partially because he has the talent you mentioned, which, if you're desiring more, it sounds bad, but I think it also is in respect to talent. But when I watch him with Kentucky, where he has a role that is a super desirable one, he can go off ball and score. And then I think what actually impressed me the most this year of his entire season was when they played Gonzaga and Kirk Kriisa and Lamont Butler were out, and he played point guard. He showed more of a diverse skill set than I had anticipated, was distributing well, scored well. He's able to orchestrate the offense, come off the pin downs, and shoot like we all knew he could. But my concern about him is he is a terrible defender. Like, he doesn't – I'm not sure he tries. And so that's the thing. What you mentioned, is he tough enough? Does he want to enough? And Otega Oweh, I don't question that. I question, is he, if he decides, hey, I'm going to defend and not try to score 16 a game, then what can he do? Jaxson Robinson, I don't think he tries defensively at all. And that's the issue, because you pair him in a backcourt with 2 great defenders, well, they can still attack him because they switch everything off the ball. Same with Koby Brea, but Brea, I think, tries. He's just slow-footed. Robinson, leaves a lot to be desired because I think his body type should allow him to move better. I think his shooting, like you said, can be better, but that doesn't bother me because it's not like he's not trying to make the shots. He takes the right ones. He slashes without the ball a little bit. In big games, he's come up big in a couple occasions. My concern is just defense and want to. And when a guy's been at 4 different schools and no coach has been able to get that out of him, it does concern me a little bit. So I'm a little lower on Jaxson Robinson. I do think the talent is there, but I think it's not like you're projecting, he didn't try very hard as a freshman. And that's my concern about Otega Oweh versus Dort as well. Dort was a freshman, and so he's trying to get his. He's a highly regarded guy. You can change mindset and say that's not going to work. Otega Oweh is in his 4th year, and now he's for some reason taken the largest role, even larger than the one he had at Oklahoma last year on a far better team, which is impressive. But I want to see him commit to the defense. I believe he has the physical attributes. Robinson, I don't think he has the switch to get to become a good defender. And if he's only shooting 36%, I think he'll get a cup of tea in the NBA, but I'm not going to put that as my most confident of these Kentucky prospects.
All valid points, especially about the defense and the multiple coaches. I want to touch on the Gonzaga game. Like you mentioned, he showed a different layer to his offensive versatility that game. He had 18 points, a season high, 5 assists. He had 4 steals. He was 7 of 15 from the floor, 2 of 5 from 3. That is a game to where you can look at, when you watch his film, you look at his talent, you think like, this is why I still have hope that he can maximize his potential. It's still hard to, I'll put it like this. For a guy that is a 5th-year senior, he's still fairly young. He entered college, I think he was like 17 as a freshman. So on one hand, you can say, all right, he's been around the block. He's closer to, he's probably almost as close as you can get to a finished product. But then there's times where you're like, I still think there's a lot of untapped potential there. But I think it's all going to boil down to, can he defend and can he knock down shots more consistently? 36% from 3 is not bad. But he's a player, and again, maybe I'm just bugging out here, but for the last, I say, year and a half, I thought like he's going to find his way up to about 38%. He's going to end up getting closer to 40. And I thought this year, he's going to shoot 40% from 3 this year.
In SEC play, he's been great. He had a bad start to the year. Like, I remember watching the Duke Kentucky game, they win, and the big takeaway was, well, the guy we thought was going to be the best player and the leading scorer didn't show up, and they still won a game, so how good's Kentucky? Yeah. So he really struggled to start the year. In SEC play, he started off 2 of 6 against Florida, 1 of 5 against Georgia, and since then 7 of 10 against Mississippi State, 5 of 13 against Texas A&M, 3 of 7 against Bama, 3 of 5 against Vandy, and 4 of 9 against Tennessee. All of those teams are tournament teams, every single one of those. And he's shooting well north. I'm not doing the math right now, but he's shooting well north of 40% in SEC play. So I think there's a real possibility that the shooting is very real. Now the question becomes, how does he do it against teams that are scheming him out of it? Because that's the advantage Kentucky has. They're so egalitarian in their attack. You don't know who's going to beat you when. Yep. That there's no way of scheming him out. Like, the guy who they try to scheme out and take away is Koby Brea, because he's that good of a shooter, and yet he's still shooting 48%. So that's why I say I believe in the inevitability of his shooting getting him to the league, even though he's a less athletic guy, bit older, and I see no way that he fails in that regard. And it's hard to see a world where he's a great NBA player, but it's hard to see a world where he doesn't get a cup of tea in the NBA at the very least because of his unbelievable, inevitable shooting ability.
Yep. And to touch on your point about Jaxson Robinson shooting in SEC play, he is shooting 45% from 3 on, I'm going to round it up to 8 attempts per game in SEC play. He's averaging 15 points, shooting 46% overall. Again, these are the flashes as to why I still think that he is Kentucky's best NBA prospect. And I don't even think it's a situation where, you're wrong if you have him as their 4th best NBA prospect, just because this team is that unique. All right, up next, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into Kentucky's 2025 potential NBA draft picks. I want to talk about Amari Williams And then also talk about the one and done era. Is the one and done era over for Kentucky? Because they have a pretty good recruiting class coming in, but are they one and dones? Stay tuned. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. And if you've been to an NFL playoff game or the Super Bowl, then you know all about the energy and the excitement of the atmosphere of a game with big stakes on the line. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to big events like the NFL playoffs or even the Super Bowl even easier. It filters out all of the fluff, so you only see the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to spend so much time wasting time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, last segment. I want to talk about Amari Williams. Amari Williams is a player that I had on my Big Board 1.0. I thought he was at least a top 60 prospect. He's averaging close to a double-double, rounded up 9.8 points, 8.9 rebounds, very good passer, 7-footer. Was it you that questioned if he's a legitimate 7-footer?
Yeah, and I'll take that back. He's bigger than I realized. And here I'll go a step further. You know how I was talking about who you should take away on Kentucky? It's not his scoring, but if I were playing Kentucky, I would pressure the ball when he has it because they run so many split cuts, Princeton actions off the ball, get him threes, get Robinson Brea threes, and split guys to the paint. If I were playing Kentucky and I was coaching against them, I'd pressure him because he's the head of the snake. We talk about how they don't have a true point guard. Like Lamont Butler's a winner, but he's not necessarily the truest orchestrator. Kirk Crease has been out. Jaxson Robinson in times has had to step in and play point guard, but he's averaging 1 assist per game. So the guy who stirs the drink offensively for what's a potent attack is actually their 5-man, Amari Williams. So he's impressed me there. But I will say the reputation that preceded him coming to the SEC, he's a tremendous athlete. He's big. He's long. He is big and long, but he's not the athlete that he was rumored to be because he was dominating inferior athletes in an inferior league. In the SEC play, he's kind of just another guy. And that concerns me in terms of his NBA prospects. But in terms of size and intangibles, I've been more than impressed since we had our discussion.
Do you think he's a top 60 guy? Because, I do think there's value in the NBA for 7-footers that can rebound and pass. And then another question I have for you, what do you think of him on the defensive end? He's averaging about a block and a half per game. Good rim protector on the college level. He had a couple seasons at Drexel where he averaged 2 blocks per game. What are your thoughts on him as an NBA prospect and as a defender and how it translates to the next level?
See, that's the part I'm skeptical of. I don't think he's the athlete. He's not fleet-footed or explosive in terms of the way he gets off the floor. I think he's intelligent. He positions himself nicely, and his length is noticeable on the screen. Like you can tell he's able to influence shots more so than Brandon Garrison, who is a better, more fleet-footed athlete. So I think he's a far better college player. But my issue is in the NBA, these guys, with the exception of so few, are so easily able to leave the floor and influence shots. And I was in a press conference yesterday at the Jazz game, and Chris Finch talked about how the NBA is different from all the other leagues in the world because of finishing at the rim. The people at the NBA level are so athletic, they're able to adeptly finish at the rim, whereas other leagues, they decide not to go there if there's a true influencer at the rim and takes away that, and they shoot threes or they play off 2 feet. I don't see him as the guy that deters people at the NBA level. Like I watch all these Jazz games, and Walker Kessler obviously 4 blocks a game at Auburn, but just an example, he averages 2.5 blocks a game at the NBA level, and you don't think of Kessler as this. Wow, he gets off the floor unbelievably quickly, but it's night and day difference between how they leave the floor and how they run the floor. I mean, you look at a lot of players in the NBA, and I don't see Amari Williams' burst translating. I think he's got the intangibles I think he's got the size. I just don't think he's got the athleticism. And sometimes this is unfortunate to say, but sometimes people are recruited for athletic traits, and that's why they go to the Kentuckys of the world and their first stop. And sometimes players are late bloomers like Amari Williams, and they go to the Drexels of the world. But the real story is somewhere in the middle, that he's better than where he was to begin. But I don't think in terms of the athletic traits that you would say, hey, this 18-year-old's got it, which is what typically allures NBA scouts, has them salivating. I don't think he measures in that way to other centers that have come out. So I'm going to say I'm a little skeptical of his defensive ability at the NBA level.
You brought up a good point about how you can end up going to like a big school like Kentucky because of your athleticism and potential. And then if you don't fit that bill, you kind of slip between the cracks. And Amari Williams averaged 1.1 points per game at Drexel. So he's definitely improved and gotten better. And then, of course, he ends up at a Power 4, a blue blood. I'm so used to saying Power 5, but he ends up at one of the premier programs in college basketball. Let's talk about Brandon Garrison. He's a player that some people still think could be Kentucky's best NBA prospect. I know he had some buzz coming into the season. I did think it was interesting that he would, and I don't remember who committed first, but that with Williams there, that I didn't think they could really play together a lot. What are your thoughts on Garrison? Because he showed some flashes as a freshman.
Yeah, I came in curious about him. I watch him, and the college basketball lover in me takes over more than the scout, because when he's in, I think, wow, they should bring Amari Williams back in because the offense flows better when Amari Williams is back in.
Mm-hmm.
And their offense is so potent that it makes up for their ineptitude defensively, considering how highly they're ranked. So I think he would need to improve his jump shot because he's a little more slight of build than Amari Williams. He's a little smaller. He is a solid defender, and like I said, he's more fleet of foot. But I think he'd really need to improve his jump shot to be a stretch big as opposed to just a rim protecting changing ends big.
Yeah, his situation is different to me simply because you wonder, is he in a better position from an NBA draft perspective if he stays at Oklahoma State? Simply because his minutes are down, production is down from last year. And even though he didn't have like a monster freshman year, he averaged like 7.5 points. He was on radars. And he's still on radars now. But by going to Kentucky, yes, you're playing in a better team. You have better teammates. There's more exposure. But he doesn't – I mean, he's obviously, in my opinion, going to have to come back to school for another year. So I think he's lost some of his buzz. But to me, he still is an intriguing long-term NBA prospect.
Yeah, I think he's got to shoot better than the 29% from three.
Agreed.
And then from the free throw line, he's shooting 55%. So the shooting splits have to really improve, considering he's 6'10", 250, but he doesn't have that same kind of girth that Amari has. And then you also, I would say 250 seems generous. I feel like he's gotten lighter and able in order to play some of the four that he's played. He's played mostly five, but he plays a little bit of the four. And I think that's probably been something that's changed his trajectory as well.
Yeah, because he averaged 1.5 blocks per game last year as a freshman at Oklahoma State. And I mean, I don't even think it's 1 block per game this year. All right, let's talk about their recruiting class. They have Jasper Johnson, who is the name that comes up a lot when you talk about McDonald's game snubs. I spoke with someone and they had mentioned that the reason why, and again, I haven't done the research, but I did speak with someone about it. And they said he went like 1 for 20 in the grind session in front of a lot of the decision makers. I guess it was over a series of games with a lot of decision makers. And that's one reason why he didn't make the McDonald's game, because he didn't show up. What do you think about him as a prospect? I don't know if you had the chance to watch him or if you have a fair eval on him. But what do you think about him? And do you think he could be a one and done prospect for Kentucky?
Yeah, I haven't watched enough to be overly confident, but what I will say is he fits the archetype of prospects that John Calipari would have gotten, in the sense that athletically he fits the billing. He passes the prerequisites. It is what it is. Like Amari Williams, when he came out of high school, did not, and Jasper Johnson does. doesn't mean he's necessarily the better player. Like, I think the skill development is certainly going to be necessary. But you've looked at some of the guys Calipari got even in this last class. Like Carter Knox came in and he was heralded. He wasn't unbelievably hyped up, but like you look at his build, you look at what he does, and then you look at the production, and something's left to be desired. And I'm not saying that to rip into Knox, but I think it's a similar situation. Kentucky's new blueprint, as this is titled, is going after transfer guys, finding guys that are cohesive into a unit of Mark Pope's pretty aesthetically pleasing offense. So if he starts to develop some of those skills, but namely knocking down threes with the body type he has, I think he could definitely be a prospect. But I do think the era of just churning out one and done talent is over for Kentucky, because what they're doing is the right thing for college basketball. They're focusing on winning basketball games and not developing a brand saying, hey, look at me, I have 35 NBA players, and losing in the first weekend like Calipari was. So I think there's a chance, but I would be a little bit skeptical in terms of saying he's one and done. But I want to preface this by saying I have not watched much of him whatsoever.
Yeah, that's fair, and you got to respect the honesty. But that's what makes you fun to have on the show, or just a great co-host, because you're gonna shoot it straight shooter. You don't hold your tongue, especially when it comes to Coach Cal and his offense. Real quick, we'll end on this. What is going on with Arkansas? Like I said, I know you watch more college basketball. I'm sure you had a chance to like really evaluate them. I know this is a Kentucky pod, but you know it's still hard to like not mention Coach Cal. But what is going wrong in Arkansas?
Well, it's similar to the issue that happened at Kentucky at the end. He was recruiting to say, look, I'll turn you into pros, and with no regard for what's happening in modern college basketball, which is shooting. Shooting's becoming more and more important. Like UConn's defense was great. They had interior presence, but what made them special is they have so much gravity for their shooting the last couple of years. So they've won. Well, look at Arkansas's roster construction. Their best shooter is 7'2", and it's not close. It's not even remotely close. And then their best player in terms of this year is Adu Thiero, who for years past has been a six-man utility guy. He took a large leap, and that's all credit to him. But what had been anticipated was the best player was going to be DJ Wagner, who's not even the best player at his own position. So Calipari's over-recruiting positions, and he's making it so players on that team are playing out of position and outside their skill set, and they don't have enough shooting. They're taking leaps of faith on internal development, and the only one who's truly improved a ton is Adu Thiero, and I don't think he was the one you'd anticipate improved a ton. It was anticipated that DJ Wagner and Janelle Davis would be the best two players on this team. Neither player's played well, and neither player is known as a prolific shooter anyway. So that's poor coaching, poor personnel choice. Then you look at Ivisic. Ivisic is a good shooter, but he's a horrible, horrible defender, despite being 7'2". Jonas Adu is the
shot blocker. Like if you saw stats from last year, like the shot blocks, the blocks per minute or whatever were elite.
He's the worst defender in the SEC. Like
the whole conference.
I mean, like if you look at the bigs, the starting bigs in that conference, I think that's a reasonable claim. Like Jonas Adu is a far better college basketball player. I understand the appeal of Ivisic. Like he can shoot the ball and he's 7'2". He blocks a few shots, but in pick and roll, he might be the worst defender in the SEC. And that's not among just college basketball. I mean, not among NBA prospects. That's the entire conference. You look at the centers and he gets beaten up every time. Like if you rattle off each center, I think he's probably the worst defender. And then you look at Calipari, but the thing is, he's got loyalty and buy-in of all these guys, and they always show the stat of how many brothers and fathers have played for Calipari. So all these guys love him as a player, development and the loyalty. But the team's not winning, and none of these guys are reaching their potential because they're stagnated by the others. So I said the same thing about Woodson, and maybe this is a bit of a victory lap, but it's not too hard to see. Like Mike Woodson chose to recruit over guys on his team instead of developing around the players that would be cornerstones of the team. Like it made no sense for Malik Renew to be recruited over and put in Umar Barlowe for $2 million. Then you get a slasher in Miles Rice, who's actually very good, but you play a team that can't shoot, and you have all these guys playing out of position. Calipari is maybe not playing out of position, but he's playing guys over other guys, and so you don't have the growth and allowing for people to really shine. And from the NBA draft perspective, to get back on topic, but the reason they struggle so much is because none of these players are built to help the other players. They're all individually going to Calipari with the hope of being NBA prospects. And I don't think anyone's helped their stock other than Adu Thiero. And I think that might be in spite of Calipari's coaching.
And when you talk about the shooting, DJ Wagner, well, I'm going to touch on this. You said they're not playing out of position. I disagree with that, especially this year because you had Davis, Wagner, and Boogie Fland all starting together.
That would be the exception. I would agree. I think Fland was the best point guard, and I said that before the year started. I've never been a DJ Wagner believer. But I think the wings are not playing out of position. I should rephrase that.
And DJ Wagner he's been bad. He's been really bad in conference play. I mean, even last year when he struggled, he still shot 42% from the floor, 32% in conference play. This year, he's playing about 9 more minutes per game, over 7 games, 35% from the floor, 18% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. I think I don't know what happens with him next year. I'm so curious about that because they bring in Darius Acuff, and you imagine Cal is going to give him the keys. But anyway, this is a Kentucky podcast. Cal is in Arkansas. DJ Wagner is in Arkansas. But it's a big game coming up tomorrow. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. And also check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com. Once again, it's Rafael and Leif Thulin, and we are out of here.